future. There are no people in the future. No people at all. There are no people in the future. Where did all my people go? There are no people in the future. Let me try my people call. Where are all my people? Where are all my people? I guess I'll fly away now.
Hey, everybody, where are all my people? Right here, of course, because it's Monday. Yes, it's Monday, May 2nd, 2022, and here it is, a special 11 a.m. time of Out to Coop Live. This is Raging Chicken's Out to Coop Live, and I'm Kevin Mahoney, creator and founder of Raging Chicken. On Out to Coop Live, we talk to progressives, activists, and troublemakers of all sorts, right from our own backyard and from across the country. You can also join us at the end of the week for our Friday Politics Roundup, where we break down the good, the bad, and the ugly in state and national politics. You can also check out our once or twice monthly The Wednesday Show with Cyril Michaleko. Yes, of course, you know Cyril. Cyril is a progressive columnist from the Bucks County Courier-Times, the Intelligencer, and the editor-in-chief for the Bucks County Beacon. Cyril and I get together to drill down into Bucks County, Pennsylvania, and international politics. You can get all our shows by subscribing to our podcast on Podbean, iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. And you can help support this show by becoming a patron for as little as $5 a month. Head on over to patreon.com/rcpress and become a patron today. You can also help out the show by heading over to our YouTube channel if you're not there already. Smash that subscribe button, like the stream for the show, and hit that notification bell so you know every time that we go live. You can also check in on our Discord server. Info on that is in today's show notes. And for more PA progressive talk, you can tune into the Rick Smith Show's live stream at 9 p.m. Eastern, on his YouTube channel, Twitter, basically wherever you can get a stream, you're going to find Rick at 9 p.m. Eastern. You can also check out all his shows by heading over to ricksmithshow.com for the latest across all his platforms. And you got to check out the Sisters of the Night Caucus podcast if you haven't already. The amazing PA women stirring the political cauldron behind this podcast rock the house, and they know where the bodies are buried. Yes, make sure to follow them on Twitter at The Night Caucus. That's at The Night Caucus on Twitter, and subscribe to their podcast on Anchor, Spotify, iTunes, wherever you get your podcast. And attention gamers, the Game Inn is a Quakertown-based, black family-owned gaming store. They're friends of the show, and they've got everything from retro N64s, the latest consoles, video games for all platforms, collectibles, action figures, Funko Pops, and look, kids get a discount with A's on their report card. How can you beat that? Check them out on their Facebook page and follow them on Twitter at The Game Inn. That's with 2 N's. Got a question about a game, looking for something hard to get, shoot them a message or drop them an email at thegameinpa@gmail.com. Special shout out goes, as usual, to Jonathan Mann, who wrote our intro song, There Are No People in the Future. Check out all his stuff on his YouTube page and follow him on Twitter at @SongADayman, again with 2 N's. That's @SongADayman on Twitter. And look, if you want to help us here at Raging Chicken and the domination of right-wing money tipping the scales to the extreme on our school boards and on our communities, well, we've made that easy. Drop a donation to the Raging Chicken Community Fund at ragingchicken.levelfield.net. Help us support community organizing and school board candidates that our communities and our children deserve. Yes, indeed. Well, you're here today, and I'm super excited to welcome Garen Meguerian to the show. We'll be talking about his 3-part series in the Bucks County Beacon and how defamation lawsuits can be used as weaponized tools of censorship. He digs into how a rash of defamation suits filed by prominent local Republicans underscores the need for stronger laws protecting the right to free speech in Pennsylvania. Meguerian is an experienced litigator and trial lawyer licensed in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and the state of New Jersey. He has represented clients in both state and federal courts. He is AV peer-reviewed, rated from Martindale-Hubbell, reflecting achievement at the height of professional excellence and integrity. Meguerian received his law degree from Georgetown University Law Center in 1995, where he served as an associate editor for the American Civil Law Review. He earned his Bachelor's of Arts in honors philosophy from Villanova University in 1992, where he was awarded the university's Valedictory Medallion. How about that? Meguerian is a member of the National Employment Lawyers Association and Chester County Bar Association. Welcome to the show, Garen Meguerian.
Thank you for having me, Kevin. Looking forward to our chat.
I am so thrilled to have you on. I can't think of a better timing for your 3-part series in the Bucks County Beacon. I think it's not only is it good, kind of informative, but I think it's actually going to help provide the community with some of the tools it needs to help understand what the stakes are at this point. So thank you for that.
My pleasure.
Hey, so before we get into the specifics of your piece, can you talk a little about kind of what your generally focus is as a lawyer? What is some of your kind of background that brought you, to be looking at these cases around defense of free speech and the abuse of defamation lawsuits?
Sure. So I'm an employment attorney, and I focus mostly on representing individuals who are discriminated against or harassed at work. I also handle consumer fraud claims on behalf of consumers who've been ripped off. And I have a major soft spot for the underdog, and I always have. And I found my way to First Amendment work through literal underdogs, like dogs who are confined in breeding kennels throughout Pennsylvania under horrible conditions. So my wife, who's also an attorney, started volunteering at a local animal shelter that was taking in and trying to rehab some of these dogs, these survivors that were mostly used for breeding, who had essentially been tortured for their entire breeding lives, and who are now trying to, this shelter was trying to get them adopted, rehabbed, and adopted. And through my wife's volunteering, I also became aware of some human victims from some of these kennels, people who typically purchase a sick dog and end up with a massive veterinary bill. In other words, they were sold a puppy that was promised to be healthy, pedigree dog, but ended up with puppies with parvo, usually a fatal illness that requires incredibly expensive 24-hour vet care if you have any hope of saving the puppy. Anyway, with my background in consumer fraud litigation, I accepted one of those cases on behalf of a ripped-off consumer. And as I was litigating that case, I went down like a dark rabbit hole. And a volunteer who'd been trying to curb some of the abuse at these mills stepped up and started providing me a ton of background information about how these kennels operate, how they use disreputable veterinarians to keep their operations going, etc. And this volunteer who stepped up was like a cipher. I mean, she knew everything about this area. She was able to trudge through vast amounts of public records and find needles in haystacks, and in significant part because of how well she was able to educate me and provide me with hard evidence in support of my client's claims, we were able to reach a settlement in that consumer fraud case, which was the first of its kind, really. And through that litigation, and because she had earned both my respect and admiration, we became friends, and she continued with her strong advocacy on behalf of these puppy mill dogs, these voiceless dogs, and these being tortured in Lancaster County and in other parts of our state. And so to my shock at the time, in 2007 or 2008, this friend was named as a defendant in a defamation lawsuit. And to make matters worse, the person who sued my friend was a high public official in Harrisburg, the highest. The person basically responsible for these dogs and kennels. My friend had merely asked some rhetorical questions directed at this particular public figure about clearly a public issue. And because this public figure had been offended, she sued my client, accused her of libel and civil conspiracy, among other claims like that. And after I got over the shock of it, I became obviously outraged. I knew my friend had gotten to know her over the course of the years that we'd worked together on that other consumer fraud case. I knew her to be a person of extremely high integrity. I knew that the First Amendment not only protected the kind of speech that she had engaged in, but also encouraged this exact kind of speech. I knew that a healthy democracy depended on others doing the same thing that my friend had done. And yet, in the face of all that, she still had been sued. So I kept asking myself, what country do these people on the other side think we live in?
Right.
Like, you can't possibly be sued for criticizing a government official in Pennsylvania or in the United States. On top of that, I just could not believe that the way she had been portrayed in the complaint, my friend, which was also, by the way, leaked to the Philadelphia Inquirer at or about the time that it was filed. So I reviewed the defamatory statements, and the allegedly defamatory statements, and they were the furthest thing I could imagine from meeting the standards of libel. So, given my outrage, given my close friendship with this person, I offered to represent her in her defense, and figuring wrongly that the case would be dismissed on preliminary motions. I'm just like, this is so obvious.
Right.
On its face, this should be tossed. So that case served as my introduction to defamation law. We battled that case for unbelievably 8 years. I took other similar cases in Pennsylvania and New Jersey at that time, and each of them were long, drawn out, no holds barred lawsuits, some with multiple trips to the appellate courts. So my experiences as a lawyer defending these cases have obviously shaped my sincerely held opinions that both Pennsylvania and New Jersey desperately need strong anti-SLAPP legislation. Although there are, as I discussed in the article, there are vigorous defenses available to defendants in these suits. You still need resources and access to lawyers to avail yourself of those defenses, and not everybody can be fortunate enough to have either money that they could pour towards legal fees, or access to a friend who's willing to give up part of their lives in order to represent you. And I hope that was something I was able to convey in the series of articles published by the Beacon.
100%. And I think that, what you set up there in the first article, in the first of the 3-part series, is precisely what a version of the story that you just told. It just kind of in a more generalized fashion, right? On the one hand, we start with our assumptions about, the protections of freedom of speech, which is, basically kind of like religious dogma, like secular religious dogma in this country, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. And so we have certain, assumptions about, our ability to kind of say, okay, we can speak, especially to public officials, when we're telling the truth, right? And then to find Absolutely. Out that, well, one of the things that you say in here as part of these like dirty little secrets about free speech litigation, right, is that, well, yeah, really what it comes down to, the reality is that you only have as much free speech as you have money to defend yourself in court. And, I thought that, that really gets to the crux of what the matter, what's happening here, especially, I think, in a context where we see this like really significant division of, or kind of like inequality when it comes to wealth, and the ability to kind of, for the everyday person to actually speak up, right, and kind of contribute to their democracy through that First Amendment right, is tamped down like significantly by the ability of, really, really wealthy and powerful figures or organizations just to dump a lot of cash on something to put people in a state of fear and to make their speech go away. And that is certainly not the context of a democracy in my mind.
No, not at all. It effectively undermines the protections guaranteed by the First Amendment. I pointed to the Sarah Palin case as an example, just to start off and get everybody on the same foot. What kind of reputational damage do you think, Kevin, was done to Sarah Palin's reputation by that one editorial in the New York Times that linked her to the shootings? Like, could it possibly have added any more damage, or at least $2 million worth of damage to justify that case?
I don't know. Maybe it got her. Maybe it was the last thing that she needed in order to secure a TV contract for a future reality TV show.
That's what my mind goes to, right? You start thinking like there are obviously alternative reasons why somebody would spend $2 million in order to supposedly vindicate their name in a defamation claim, when they themselves are a massive public figure and have been a massive public figure for decades. Especially when you see what's happening on the other side. Like, routinely Republicans have weaponized the use of language like Satanists and child molesters and pedophiles, and
groomers is the latest, right?
Groomers, yeah, and they wave that at broad swaths of the Democratic Party without any kind of repercussion. Hillary Clinton was the victim of a massive slander campaign, defamation, libel campaign, and she didn't bother to seek this kind of retribution through the court system. Even though I think in seeing the standards, she certainly, being accused of being a child molester or running the child molestation ring is certainly defamatory, even if you're a high public figure like Clinton was. I think that would be per se defamatory.
Well, let me ask you this. Let me ask you, I don't want to get us too far off track here,
Yeah.
but this is an interesting question about this. And this is exactly one of the things that was going through my mind as I was reading your piece. In that case with Hillary Clinton, or all these claims that are being thrown out about, people being groomers and all this, some of these people, like Hillary Clinton, are not exactly your poor everyday person, right? That just is living down the street. They are certainly in a position where they could file these suits if need be, with probably a lot more justification or merit to their cases. But do you find that most of these suits that you're seeing are coming more from the Republican side, or from that kind of, like, I don't want to just say Republican, but from more the conservative kind of like media sphere, public sphere, political sphere, than you do from the more Democratic leaning sphere?
No, I from my experience, I see it from people who are very thin-skinned and who are in the public sphere. I think it's and who have access to lawyers and money. So it's not so much the political affiliation of folks; it's more their own kind of narcissism, their own personality, and plus
coupled with lots of money.
Exactly. That coupled with either a connection to lawyers who are willing to take a shot on their friends' claims, or lots and lots of money in order to be able to fund, litigation like this without having to worry about it.
Gotcha.
So it's sort of it's beyond party affiliation.
Yeah, because it seems like, I could see this getting played out with anybody who's, I'm looking at, in the news right now, we have folks like, Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk and all these people that are making all these, claims about stuff. And I could see, like, look, if they wanted to, they could bury virtually anybody, right, under a mountain of litigation, and they have, they have funds that they are not going to be inexhaustible, right?
Right.
So it really,
it's absolutely frightening. I mean, the scales of justice are so uneven when you count money into the equation, and especially in this arena, it's dangerous. It can erode our democracy if one segment of the population that has access to lawyers and money can effectively silence all of the others who don't.
It's crazy. So, and to underscore this point, now one of the things that you say in here before, I really want to spend some time looking at the three lawsuits by the two people in Bucks County or not just Bucks, but in our kind of area that are looking at. But before we get there, one of the things that you also say is that defamation lawsuits, right, to just underscore this point, are not easy lawsuits to win because of the kind of vigorous protections that we have for freedom of speech. And yet they get filed for these other purposes, you say. Can you talk a little about that difficulty, or what the merits would have to be in order to prove a defamation lawsuit?
Yeah. So this is going to be like a 10,000-foot overview.
Yes, of course.
But so there's vigorous protections offered under the First Amendment. And there was a seminal case called New York Times v. Sullivan, which is a better case for a movie, in my opinion, than the Larry Flint one, People versus Hustler. I think everybody saw that and was like, okay, I have the right to be a troll.
Yep.
But I think the New York Times v. Sullivan case is much more compelling. There you have the New York Times publish a paid advertisement by a civil rights organization criticizing the response of a Southern community to demonstrations led by Dr. King. And the plaintiff, who was a city commissioner in charge of the police department in Alabama, claimed that advertisement in the New York Times libeled him. And so they brought a suit, and it went all the way. They won at the trial court, got a big judgment against the New York Times. And then the case went all the way up to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court in that case unanimously said that the First Amendment can trump libel laws. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Essentially, when you're talking about a public figure and on matters of public issues like this, like obviously the civil rights claim, the court said something like, it considered the case to be against a background of profound national commitment to the principles that debate on public issues should be uninhibited, they should be robust, wide open, and that it may well include vehement, caustic, and sometimes unpleasantly sharp attacks on government and public officials. And they were willing, in weighing the reputational damage of an individual in the public eye versus the self-censorship that would incur had they allowed this libel verdict to stand, they all came down and said that we are going to side with free speech. And so that case established an incredibly high bar for public officials to bring defamation suits, or even what have now come to be known as limited purpose public figures. For example, if you enter into the fray on a public issue,
right,
you may be a private person, but you've now inserted yourself on this public issue. Therefore, you become a limited purpose public figure, and the same standards apply to you. So what are those standards? The standard is basically it's called actual malice. So if you are bringing a defamation lawsuit, you have to show that the defendant who published these allegedly defamatory statements against you did so with actual malice. And now this isn't something like we think of typically with malice, like a malice heart. You came to it with like an evil intention.
Right.
Malice in the First Amendment context means that the defamatory statement was published with knowledge that it was false, or with reckless disregard of whether it was false. And reckless disregard is not simply like you forgot to dot your I's and cross.
It's like you just did not care.
Right, but no, it's actually that you published it with serious doubts as to whether it was true or false. So what we're talking about here is almost like asking the jury to go into the person's head and say that this person knew at the time they were publishing this falsehood that it was false. And that's why Pennsylvania courts and the Supreme Court have considered this standard almost impossible to meet when you're dealing with a public figure. So,
and this would include, right, if I'm not mistaken, this would also include, like, look, if I say something that's truthful, right, about you, and you happen to run a company, right,
mm-hmm.
and that my statement is truthful. Let's say that, I don't know, like, say that you actually were funneling money to some kind of like slave exchange. Who knows? I mean, whatever it might be. And I have the documents to prove that that's going on and that's truthful, and that hurts your business. That doesn't matter, right?
No, absolutely. And truth is an absolute defense in defamation cases, which means that if you can prove the truth of it, you don't even have to get into any of the other factors. It's true. You're absolutely immune. And there's many absolute defenses. For example, if you appear before a public body that's holding an official hearing, mm-hmm. and you testify before that body, your testimony is absolutely privileged. If you file allegations in court that turn out to be false because you filed them in court and you sought relief from the court, the public institution, those allegations you put in a complaint are absolutely privileged. Now, in Pennsylvania, if you publish statements in court and then leak them to the media, and those statements happen to be false, you can be sued for those false statements, for that publication to the media. So we have, very, like you said, we have incredibly strong fundamental protections for speech. However, those strong protections, in my opinion, are meaningless if you don't have the means to actually assert those defenses in court. And that's what happens a lot of times when people get these lawsuits. They almost have to capitulate because, a lawyer is going to ask you for a $25,000 retainer. And that's not for the entire length of the case. That's for the first couple of months.
Yeah, there's people. I mean, most people don't even have $25,000 like in funds available to them. I mean, it's not like what are they going to do? Sell their house in order to put down a retainer?
So the average person faced with that faced with that impossible choice, is going to capitulate. So there goes your First Amendment right.
So let's concretize some of this stuff then. So we have your second part of this piece, the second part of this series. You're focusing in on two lawsuits that were filed by Jim Worthington from Newtown, and another one that is filed by Clarice Schilling. I always forget her last name. I think, yeah, I think I'm purposely trying to purge her name from my brain. I'm sorry, but I have this ongoing problem. But yeah, Clarice Schillinger against PA Spotlight. So can you walk us through these three lawsuits? And I know that you've got a hard out, so I want to make sure we have time to kind of get into it. So walk us through these three lawsuits to say what is happening in these lawsuits and why you would see these as examples of the abusive defamation suits that you see going on.
Yeah, so I just want to make it clear, like these lawsuits are in very early stages, and I'm not necessarily ready to
fair point. Okay.
Yeah, to say that all of them are slap suits, because frankly, that's going to be litigated, and I was comforted to see that the defendants in the case are very ably represented, particularly Ashley Ehas, who has two of the most prominent plaintiffs' personal injury firms in Philadelphia representing her, and those firms are packed with like really, really strong lawyers.
So that's good news for everybody.
That's a good news on her part, but also good news insofar as if we want to get any kind of reform, anti-SLAPP legislation passed, those two firms, to the extent that they're now aware of how defamation lawsuits can be abused, will be strong allies in helping us push for anti-SLAPP legislation. I'm hoping. I mean, that's me being a little wishful. Yep. But so anyway, so the three cases. So Worthington filed two cases, and they're difficult. They're difficult to summarize quickly, but my sense of them is that he is trying to draw a very nuanced distinction between what is true and what he considers defamatory. And the distinction is that it was true that he organized three busloads of people to go down to Washington, D.C. on January 6th to participate in the March on the Capitol.
And this was his People for Trump organization, right? That funded these buses, correct?
He funded it. He, he promoted it. And so I think the distinction he's trying to draw is that they went down there to peacefully protest, and any implication that anybody makes that he was organizing this to be a criminal act against, the U.S. Capitol. In other words, invading the U.S. Capitol. That part he considers defamatory. Now, in my head, I'm like thinking of Venn diagrams and asking myself, okay, like where is the Venn diagram that of people who would be offended if he had organized three busloads of people to actually go raid the Capitol versus who would be offended at one but not the other. Right. To me, like we're so polarized as a society. Like he's either being hailed as a hero on one side for taking three busloads down, or regarded as kind of a villain for organizing it. Like I don't see any human being or any American who looks at the Worthington situation and says, I would be okay with him sending three busloads of people down to DC, but not okay with him with any of those people on the bus invading the Capitol. I think you're either in for all or in for none. I mean, maybe, I don't know. How do you see it? Do you disagree? Or?
No. I mean, I'm 100%. I mean, I agree with that. And I also think that, if you look at the language, at least the language that I've seen that was put forward by, first by the guy who was filed was it Gregory Bullock, who filed a petition on Move On, basically drawing attention to Worthington renting these buses, and the suit that goes against Ashley Ehas, right? The kind of perspective, for all intents and purposes, Democratic nominee. We'll find out very soon to run against Fitzpatrick. In both of those cases, right, what they're saying, like, look, he funded these buses to take them down to what would eventually become this insurrection.
Right.
They're not even saying that, oh no, Jim Worthington like organized the shock troops to go in, and they're not saying that. They're saying that these buses went down for that rally. And let's be clear, that rally started on the premise that there was a big lie, that the election was stolen, that Joe Biden was not a legitimate president. Unless it might be, it doesn't matter if it's true. Well, let me put it this way. It seems to me is that the issue that both of them have took place is that, no, you were part of this organization for this rally, which eventually became this thing. They're not even making the claims that it's like, no, Jim Worthington was the mastermind behind the coup. No, they're not even saying that. And yet he wants to split hairs around, saying that, because of this word about would become the insurrection, you're claiming that I was somehow purposely, knowingly sending them there. And that wasn't even the point to begin with.
Exactly. And eventually, at some point, the defendants in the case are going to raise another good defense, which is that the gist of the defamatory piece has to be worse than the truth. In other words, like, for the ordinary reader, the gist of what they consider to be defamatory, like, say there's an actual falsehood in whatever the defendant said against Worthington. There's an act, like, they're going to have to prove that it was false, and they're going to have to prove that whatever was false was actually, the sting of it was worse than the truth. And that's what I was trying to get at with my Venn diagram thing, which is like, I don't see who, like, you're either a hero to half of the population or a villain. Like, there's nobody in the middle in this instance. And I think
kind of on the fence about this one.
Right, exactly. And so I don't, that's another very tough hurdle for Worthington to overcome in his case. But again, as we've seen already, the case against Move On and Bullough has survived that initial motion to dismiss. They're going to have other opportunities to dismiss the case, but it probably now heads into very expensive discovery. Like, Bullough is in it for the long haul, as it's Move On. And, every time that happens, there's another reason to capitulate, right?
Well, and you say, like, we have a question from Emily. Emily saying, isn't Worthington just doing this to distract Ahaz from Ahaz's campaign? Can't believe he expects to win. But one of the points that you make, right, is the goal is not necessarily to win. Right. You could lose and still win, and you can win and still lose. Like, I've had clients prevail after 7-year battles, and then get in a published Superior Court opinion, published Supreme Court opinion in their favor, and still at the end of the day, you're left with empty pockets, or you've now been so distracted from your business or what you were trying to do before that you no longer want to do it. Even as I was representing my advocate clients, I would say to them, don't post. And it would break my heart. Yeah. It would break my heart. But I didn't want any more to, I didn't want to deal with any more pleadings that mischaracterize their words. Because that's what it is. Like, the lawyers on the other side are clever. They will take statements and make them look as nefarious as possible in order to get the court to allow the claims to survive. In this case, in Worthington's cases, the claims are that he was accused of violating federal and state laws. To me, as an ordinary reader of the statements, I don't see that in there. No.
But the way they're characterized in the complaints, you would think that actually Ahaz issued some, manifesto detailing all the ways Worthington committed crimes. That's not what she did. But that's the way the complaint reads,
right?
Because Worthington got a clever lawyer who is taking the essence of what Ashley Ahaz says and casting it in the worst possible light in order to survive dispositive motions.
Well, and doesn't this also I mean, I'm sure this is not always the case in every situation, but it also seems to me that someone like Jim Worthington, who is a self-proclaimed kind of well-known businessman, funder, a politician, he doesn't hide any of that stuff, right?
Nope. No, he's a public figure in other words, right?
I mean, so it's not like he's coming out of obscurity and somebody's targeting some random business owner, right? I mean, he's a very public figure. He celebrates the fact that he has Brian Fitzpatrick on speed dial, things like this. So if he's in some cases, and this is kind of, I think, the case or the point you were making about Sarah Palin, is that even by leaking that, well, I don't even want to say leaking it, I don't know if he leaked this or not, but by having this case out there, by filing the case itself, in this kind of polarized climate, that could, not necessarily, but that could also help bolster claims of being an important person, right?
Exactly.
Of being a powerful power broker within, in this case, Republican Party.
You don't know what the other side's motives are. But and because of that, you can lose and win.
Right. So let's take a couple minutes to talk about the Clarice Schillinger case against PA Spotlight. Talk us through a little bit what's happening in that case, and if there's kind of significant differences there, or the points that you were pulling out in that one.
Yeah, and that one, again, it really took close reading for me to understand what was happening here. But I guess she took offense that her Keeping Kids in School PAC was labeled a dark money organization. And again, for me, dark money is one of those terms that's tossed around so much. I had a different idea of what dark money was than the way she defines it in the complaint. To me, dark money is basically like if you're being funded by a billionaire or millionaire, like somebody who doesn't necessarily want themselves super well known. So they hide it behind a group, call that group a different thing. Yes, you can still track the money in some instances back to the billionaire who's making the donations, but it's not on the foreground. On the signs, it won't say this candidate's endorsed by billionaire Dick Uihlein. It'll say this candidate's endorsed by the Back to School PA PAC, or something like that. So to me, that's. I mean, I don't know.
I would say that's kind of an everyday. That's the way I think most people think about dark money. Right. And it seems like she wants to, in this case, she wants to say, no, dark money means only if you cannot absolutely trace it, right? If there's no way of finding out at all, right?
She's taken this incredibly narrow definition of dark money and has made a defamation case out of it. And the other part of her case is that I guess she was offended that she was linked to QAnon conspiracy theorists. But if your organization is actually promoting the candidacy of, I guess at least three QAnon sympathetic candidates, these are people who are trying to get on school boards and they're retweeting QAnon conspiracy theories. I think that's fair criticism. You've injected yourself into the public sphere. You're claiming that you're about kids' health and all that. I think it's fair criticism if somebody says that you are promoting QAnon conspiracy theorists for office.
No, and this is what you say in the article, right? Keeping Kids in School PAC cannot deny that it endorsed several QAnon-affiliated and QAnon-sympathetic candidates. Specifically, Keeping Kids in School PAC endorsed Ricky Norley Chayton in my school district, the Penridge School Board, Ada Nestor of the Westchester Area School District, and Cora Landis for the Palisades School District, each of whom have, at the very least, shared QAnon content through their social media accounts. This is something that's publicly available, has been published, right? I mean, Cyril Michaleko, a matter of fact, published a bunch of stuff in the Beacon. So this is not, I mean, how do you walk away from something like that other than saying, oh, well, we just didn't consider it, we had no idea? I mean, it's crazy.
And again, it's like really, really nuanced reading that the average reader of these posts is not going to do. Her attorneys are really parsing things to make these words seem as bad as possible, but the average reader doesn't do it that way. And that at the end of the day, the court is going to have to look at it from the perspective of an average reader, not from the perspective of Schillinger and her lawyer trying to make it seem as bad as possible.
So it's pretty, and in that case, this was to your point. I mean, PA Spotlight published this, right? They published an article on their website, and that kind of basically pointed to these funding mechanisms, what was kind of happening behind, I almost say Coriolanus's name, but Clarice Schillinger's kind of candidacy and this Keeping Kids at School PAC. And this lawsuit is filed, and what happens? Well, PA Spotlight pulls down the article. Right? And so the article is now gone, right? So we see this actually working its effect before it ever kind of gets litigated in court.
It's incredibly effective. I mean, if PA Spotlight had an insurer and the insurer appointed defense counsel, the first thing defense counsel would say, stop the damage, take down the post.
Yep.
Because that way we can at least say it was only up for 2 months, hardly anybody read it, and that gives us another way out. Yeah, I mean, this is the unfortunate side effect.
It's pretty crazy. Well, listen, I know you got a hard out, but I want to get the last couple of minutes for you to talk a little bit about, say, okay, what's our way out of this? And you make a case in here that what we really need is really serious legislative reform when it comes to against SLAPP suits. Can you talk a little bit about what is needed?
This is a problem that's been solved by other states. Specifically, California solved it. New York has solved it. 30 other states have laws similar to California's that solve it. California passed their law about 20 years ago, and it has like 3 major components. Number one is make these defamation cases as hard to file as they are to win. Like I think of a defamation case as like you filed it, now you're on the highway to hell. Right. Yeah. And California gives you like this exit off the highway really, really early before you're stuck on there. If you get hit with a SLAPP suit or a defamation suit that you consider as a SLAPP, you take it to a lawyer. The lawyer looks at it and says, yeah, I agree with you. This is a SLAPP. You can file a motion within the first 60 days that gets heard within 30 days, usually. And the judge decides whether or not that lawsuit is a SLAPP and really takes a hard look at it based on specific criteria that California, that the statute gives them. And then if the case gets tossed, you prevail early, you're not out a whole lot of money. And so that's essential. So give trial judges an opportunity to dismiss these cases very, very early. That's number one. Number two is equalize access to justice by taking money out of the equation. And the way you do that is the way it's been done in consumer fraud litigation and civil rights litigation and employment litigation, where you're dealing with discrimination claims and harassment claims. You shift the attorney fee to the losing party. So that creates a strong incentive for lawyers like me to get involved on behalf of victims of SLAPP suits. If you get sued, I will represent you for free, knowing that if we prevail on our SLAPP motion, then I'm going to get my fees paid and you're going to be okay. Now, right now in Pennsylvania, there is zero incentive other than, for somebody being able to pay you for a lawyer to get involved. If you don't happen to have a friend who practices defamation law, you might be out of luck. And what this also does is fee shifting also limits the other side's ability to publicize and intimidate everybody around them. So in these instances, like, you often have the person suing also publicizing their lawsuit. And what this does is has a chilling effect on everybody. But if you can reverse that chilling effect by publicizing your victories against those SLAPP lawsuits, a lot of times, people get sued for posting bad Yelp reviews in California. They sue, they win their fees, and now all of a sudden, like, that institution that sued them or the business that sued them looks even worse. So, and final point is, like, provide a right of immediate appeal from denials of that first motion, that first motion that gets you off the highway to hell. If you lose that motion, you should get to file an immediate appeal to the Superior Court. So you have a better chance of impartial judges who are more familiar probably with defamation claims, taking a hard look at the claims and deciding whether or not they're SLAPPs. So I really believe that these are reforms that would benefit everybody. I mean, if we want to have a democratic society, we need the First Amendment. There's a reason why it's the First Amendment. Free speech is important. It's critical. It's critical to a well-functioning, well-oiled democracy. And so these are readily available reforms. They've been tested out in other states. They work beautifully. There's all kinds of laws and precedent around them. Let's do it here in Pennsylvania. There's no reason why we should be abused like this by slap suits.
100%. Well, what's the last step, or one of the many steps we need to take in defense of our democracy? Well, listen, I know you got to get out of here. Garen Meguerian, I really appreciate your time today. You've got to check out his pieces over in the Bucks County Beacon. The first one in the series, called Defamation Lawsuits Can Be Weaponized Tools of Censorship. Check out more information about his law practice at www.garenmlaw.com. That's garenmlaw.com. Thank you once again for joining us today, and I appreciate so much the work that you're doing.
Thanks, Kevin.
All right, we'll take it easy. So everybody, we are going to get out of here. It is Monday. Yes, it is our special Monday early morning session. Thank you for tuning in. Thanks for listening. Thanks for everybody in the chat. Appreciate everybody showing up. Make sure you get the word out about this piece. Share it where you can. See ya!